$16.4 trillion. As of yesterday, this is the United States' national debt. Alone, the U.S. federal budget is over $1 trillion. Whether negative or affirmative, we should agree that these debts are staggering. Staggering, yet growing. Good afternoon. I'm Sam. Today, my partner Mindy Rosenthal and I will prove why the federal government should not substantially increase funding for transportation infrastructure. We will prove why negative is the more practical, desirable, and logical side. First off, the affirmative proposes that the federal government substantially increase its investment. According to author Paul McCaffrey, the federal government is currently responsible for just 25% of all transportation infrastructure funding. While the rest is provided by state and local authorities. The resolution demands that the federal government substantially increase its funding. But let me remind you that it is in $1.03 trillion of debt. How could it possibly afford to budget billions of dollars? State and private authorities already fund 3/4 of the money, while the federal government struggles to fund just 1/4. Second, the federal government must substantially increase its funding. According to dictionary.com, substantial means of ample or considerable amount, quantity, or size. According to a 2008 congressional study, $255 billion in annual investments over the next 50 years is required to both maintain the existing infrastructure and to build improvements. So as Matt mentioned, they want to kind of spread it thin and invest a little bit each year, but if you ask me, $255 billion is pretty substantial. Despite these figures, less than half the money the study believes is needed is currently being spent each year. In short, the affirmative proposes that the federal government invest money that is non-existent. The resolution demands that the government increase funds substantially, not slightly, but substantially. Where will this money come from? The affirmative may say that significant investment would spur new construction projects, increasing jobs throughout the nation. However, this is way too idealistic and highly improbable. We should learn from other nations. In the 1990s, Japan spent a similar $254 billion on stimulus plans that included many infrastructure programs. And despite this funding, Japan still suffered through 2 decades of economic stagnation. And I know that we're America, but let's learn from foreign affairs. The revenue will simply never compensate for the initial billions or trillions that are spent, at least not in the short term. Even if we saw a return, it would be insignificant and undervalued because who knows where we would be after our immediate plunge into the unknown. In addition, projects frequently run over budget, which is not the result of underfunding, as the affirmative may lead you to believe, but the result of mismanagement or misinformation and planning on the government's part. Essentially, more money encourages this mismanagement, which only drives debt steeper. So the only way to afford the budget would inevitably involve higher tax plans nationwide. Surprise! Your income taxes could skyrocket. Authors Mika Eisted and Neg Constr note that additional revenue for infrastructure investment is at times sourced from property and wage taxes, which also increase on a yearly basis in most cities. Do you want to be married to these taxes? I know that we cannot endure any more financial hardship, especially when the hardship can't really be justified. Simply put, the proposed funding would be detrimental to our already stagnant economic climate. This is why the negative believes that America must save to earn. In other words, our country needs to improve the basic financial quality of life for its citizens. Only then should we prioritize infrastructure. In the meantime, the government will still maintain sufficient funding to keep it functioning, on the basis that it protects the welfare of all. Government funding is often restricted to basic maintenance, except in cases where necessary to improve business and enhance the quality of life of citizens. We are often terrified when we hear about infrastructure disasters, like Hurricane Katrina in 2005 when the levees failed. We recognize the severity of these catastrophes. However, we want to stress that bridge collapses and other structure malfunctions are highly unusual and isolated. There have absolutely been situations where faulty infrastructure has killed, and we admit that, it's factual. But the number is relatively small, and the problem has often been exaggerated to win political support for costly projects. Which brings me to my next point. Yes, these disasters show that certain state governments are not investing sufficiently in maintaining their infrastructure. And yet, a plethora of experts insist that this problem, again, centers on the misuse of funds, not inadequate funding. AKA, more money is simply not the solution. The government needs to partition the funds more correctly and honestly. Above all, the federal government must focus on current and essential maintenance duties, which have been carelessly overlooked in the past. Furthermore, the affirmative will insist that the poor condition of most infrastructure, as Matt already did, threatens public welfare, but this is misleading. Let me explain. When engineers calculate totals of obsolete structures, the number usually includes both functionally obsolete facilities, which do not accommodate societal needs, and structurally deficient facilities, that are falling into disrepair. However, a structurally deficient bridge may have a bad roadway, which can be resurfaced and will not cause a bridge collapse, so no immediate or imminent danger. We are already capable of predicting problems before a failure occurs, and we have the means to remedy them. It is thus not urgent to significantly increase investments in an already sufficient system, especially when you and I cannot afford it. Perhaps it is time to cap our development anyway. The expansion of infrastructure encourages population growth before adequate resources are available for public welfare. In other words, expanding only worsens the issue, and we need to maintain the current system. Regarding congestion, more building usually spurs new development, sprawling more businesses and residencies, and still inducing more congestion and traffic. Constant development can be a devastating cycle, so we need to limit it now rather than senselessly invest and support it. In sum, the negative insists that there is no need to increase federal transportation infrastructure investments. Maintenance and management issues are the underlying issue instead. American welfare is always prioritized, yet unnecessary funding should not be. Thank you. Please vote negative.